Tokyo, 7th June 1916. Long months have gone by in which nothing could be said, for it was a period of transition, of passing from one equilibrium to another, vaster and more complete. The outer circumstances were manifold and new, as if the being needed to accumulate many perceptions and observations in order to give a more extensive and complex base to its experience. But being entirely plunged within this experience, it did not have the necessary perspective to see it as a whole, to know what it was, and above all, where it was leading. Suddenly, on the 5th of June, the veil was rent, and there was light in my consciousness. When I contemplated Thee in Thy individual form, O Lord of eternity, and implored Thee to take possession of Thy kingdom of the flesh, Thou didst set again into motion, into activity, this vital form, which, for the necessity of development and unification, had been living for years in a passivity that was receptive and harmonious, but alien to all active manifestation of Thy will. This return to activity meant a completely new adaptation of the vital instrument, for its natural tendency is always to resume action with its old habits and methods. This period of adaptation was long, painful, sometimes obscure, though behind the perception of Thy presence and perfect surrender to Thy law were immutable and quite strongly conscious for any disturbance to shake the being. Gradually, the vital being grew accustomed to find harmony in the intensest action as it had in passive surrender. And once this harmony was sufficiently established, there was light again in all the parts of the being, and the consciousness of what had happened became complete. Now, in the heart of action, the vital being has discovered the perception of infinity and eternity. It can perceive Thy supreme beauty and live it in all sensations and all forms, even in its every sensation extended, active, fully developed to feel contrary sensations at the same time. Always it perceives Thee. It is not unaware, however, that this is only one stage, and it bows before Thee in a profound adoration and tells Thee, Lord, Thou hast taken up Thy instrument again and willed to use it for action. The instrument knows its imperfection and impurity and implores Thy mercy to perfect and purify it, so that day by day, through a progressive disappearance of all its preferences and limitations, it may be able to manifest Thee more integrally. 28th November 1916. Thou madest me read these childish babblings once again, for they are awkward attempts at expression of a mind still in its infancy, and all this seemed to me far, very remote, clad in the charm and purity of the experiences of a candid and enthusiastic childhood. And yet, before Thee, O Eternal Lord, I have not grown any older and have not made any progress. The expression of today will not be better than that of those early days. The mind is still as poor and clumsy as before. And what could it have to express that is so remarkable? No sensational experience. All experiences now seem simple and natural. No powerful or exceptional new idea. None of those ideas which fill one with the joy of discovery. All ideas, whatever form they may take, now seem like old acquaintances one greets amicably in passing, but from whom one expects nothing new. No scrupulous and detailed psychological analysis exposing some yet unexplored inner recess. Internal complications no longer exist in themselves. They are faithful and impartial reflections of all the surrounding psychological movements, and to describe what is going on in the being would be at once as complicated and monotonous as to describe the world in its almost exclusively subconscious gropings and wanderings. Poverty, poverty, Thou hast placed me in an arid and bare desert, and yet this desert is sweet to me as everything that comes from Thee, O Lord. In this dull and worn greyness, in this dim ashen light, I taste the savour of the infinite spaces, the pure breeze of the open seas, the powerful breath of the free heights constantly fill my heart and penetrate my life. All barriers have fallen within and around me, and I feel like a bird opening its wings for an unrestrained flight. But the bird remains perched upon a rock, its wings outspread against the grey, fleecy sky, awaiting in order to soar upwards the coming of something it expects without knowing what it is. As it no longer has any chains to check its flight, it no longer dreams of flying away. Conscious of its freedom, it does not enjoy it, and remains like the others, among the others, perched on the ground in the midst of the dark and dense fog. 4th December 1916. Since Thou hast permitted it, O Lord, I have once again begun to come to Thee daily, freeing myself for a few brief moments from an activity of which I know the complete relativity even while I am engaged in it. Thou hadst plunged me back into action and the ordinary consciousness, and now thou grantest me the possibility of regularly taking my flight again to thee, to soar a while in the immutable silence and eternal consciousness. Thou hast willed, O Lord, that the being should grow wider and richer. It could not do so without entering once again, at least partially and temporarily, into ignorance and obscurity. This ignorance and obscurity it comes now to lay at thy feet as the most humble of ordeals. I shall not ask thee to bestow upon me continuously the consciousness thou grantest me in these moments of peaceful and pure communion. I shall ask thee only to make these moments still more peaceful and pure, to fortify and enlighten the consciousness more and more, so that it may return to its daily task with renewed strength and knowledge. Thou remindest me through these brief moments of ecstatic identification that thou hast granted me the power of consciously uniting with thee, and the divine musical harmony captures the entire being, but the sounds gather in the head as behind a veil, and not a word flows from the pen today. 5th December 1916. Thou hast granted me the grace of thy repose, in which all individual limits are dissolved, in which one is in all, and more clearly still, all is in oneself. But the mind, merged in this divine ecstasy, cannot yet find any power of expression. Factual notation of the experience. Turn towards the earth. The usual injunction was heard in the silence of the immutable identification. Then the consciousness became that of the One in all, everywhere and in all those in whom thou canst see the One. There will awake the consciousness of this identity with the divine. Look. It was a Japanese street, brilliantly illuminated by gay lanterns, picturesquely adorned with vivid colors, and as gradually what was conscious moved on down the street, the divine appeared, visible in everyone and everything. One of the lightly built houses became transparent, revealing a woman seated on a tatami in a sumptuous violet kimono embroidered with gold and bright colors. The woman was beautiful and must have been between 35 and 40. She was playing a golden samisen. At her feet lay a little child, and in the woman, too, the divine was visible.